What's going on, guilty guys and gals, and welcome back to Tier Lists. Now, if you read my post on Monday, I had to remember what day it was. Oh man, you'll know that I'm doing this week, partially because I'm busy, and partially because it's the end of the year, so I have to let my opinions be known about everything I've done this year in terms of stuff. What is the word I'm looking for? Content? I don't know. But today is probably going to be the less popular video just because it's not anything to really do with my channel, but it is something that I greatly enjoy, which is the medium of animation. I can already see like people being like, dude, how many things do you like? You got like musicals and video games and making video games and then also animation, and like, how do you have the time for it? I don't. That's the thing, which is why there are only 6 shows here. These are the 6 shows that I watched in 2020, at least partially, because I believe there was only like a couple Steven Universe Future episodes in 2020, and the same with SheRa. There was only a season or so. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. Wait. Oh no. I forgot to put it in the folder. Well. Alright, I kind of fixed it. For some reason, Infinity Train Book 3 went in twice instead of once, but don't worry about that. I can't even remember what I was on about, but I think I was about to say that, like, this is probably the most shows I've ever watched in a year. Usually I get like 1, if you're lucky. So it's kind of pitiful, but hey, that's what it's like. I'm going to be ranking them in terms of how much I enjoyed them, how good I think they are, and how like much I'd recommend them. I'll try to keep away from spoilers, but there might be some. I'll try to keep it light. Like, I won't spoil the end game of any of these. But yeah, let's get into it. By the way, after I put everything in A tier, I'm going to pick the best of the year, which is why that is S tier. Okay, so starting with Brand New Animal. Now, I am not an anime fan, which might shock you considering that I do a lot of Danganronpa stuff, but it's not indicative of the rest of what I enjoy. I've tried to watch animes before. I couldn't even get through the Ace Attorney anime. It's just, there's some sort of a disconnect between like reading the subtitles and then seeing what's on the screen, and a lot of them are super tropey, and I kind of hate it. That doesn't mean that there's not good anime that I might enjoy. It's just, I don't know. It's one of those things that just gets under my nerves. Brand New Animal is a little bit different. I don't know. It showed up on Netflix one day and was recommended to me, and I'm like, fine, sure, why not? And I had a pretty good time with it. Not great time, though. And I preface this with the anime thing by to let you know that that's because, or that may influence my choices here, but I found Brand New Animal to also be a little bit underdeveloped in a lot of places. Without getting into spoilers, the ending really had me scratching my head. It didn't relate to anything else that was really going on. And over the course of the series, I found myself caring a lot more about SheRa than anyone else. Like, and SheRa is not the main character. SheRa is this dude in the back here. But I don't know. There was something weird about it. It felt like he was the main character. He's always going around saving Michiru and doing all that stuff. And then at the end, it seemed like it was his story, and it left Michiru in the dust for the most part. Not a big fan of that. The world building they set up and like the way they tackled some of like the stuff they were dealing with there in terms of like issues, I actually did quite like. I also liked the idea that this like utopian place for this marginalized group really didn't help them that much, right? It's somebody from the outside looking in thinking, yeah, we just shove them over here and everything will be fine. I don't know. It was a good show. I would recommend it. Actually, honestly, I think I'm going to end up saying I recommend all of these. But probably less so. This is probably going to be my only C tier. And again, that doesn't mean it's bad. It was just the least good. You know what I mean? And I didn't do this intentionally, but now we're going to the best good, possibly, which is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have so much to say about Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'd never watched the show before, and we're going to get to this in a couple of these, where I watched the first couple episodes because people were like, oh, it's so good, and I just didn't jive with the first 2 episodes. There's something, it was just like boring to me. But it sucks, because as soon as you get out of like the first 2 episodes, it starts getting really good. And that's the worst part, is I was that close to watching this like 4 years ago, and I just didn't do it. I like almost every character in this show that I'm supposed to like, you know, like the hateable characters are properly hateable. And the world is honestly, it took me back to like when I first read Harry Potter, because that was the thing about Harry Potter I actually enjoyed. I really didn't I didn't care at all about, this is a cartoons video, I should probably tone it down a bit. I didn't care at all about what was happening with Voldemort. Nah, I was just interested in the magic world building, and it had a really good magic world building until like halfway through, and that's when I started to lose interest. This show never stops world building. Even the very last episode gives us insight into what the world was like thousands of years ago, through this new technique that Aang learns. It's really good. It's one of the only like blemish on this entire show, I'd say, is like the one episode where they focused entirely. Was that? I think that was just a part, actually. Never mind. I was thinking of the episode where it focuses entirely on Appa, but that one I actually really liked. I was thinking of the one part where it focuses on Momo, and that was the only part I ever felt bored in this show. But that was just like a tiny episode, or a tiny part of a clip show episode, which was really good otherwise. So, yeah. Definitely A tier. There's some things I could get into, like Aang and Katara's relationship I didn't particularly buy into. Or like Aang as a character I wasn't super interested in most of the time. But the thing is, that doesn't matter, because sure, Aang is the main character, but that just lets the other characters have cool, unique arcs, right? Like, Aang is your stereotypical protagonist for like a kid's cartoon. And then everybody else gets to have arcs about like revenge and like, I don't know, claiming your own identity. It's really good. And I can't recommend it enough. Honestly. That's it. SheRa. I'm going to be talking about all it like as a whole, even though I only watched like, I think it was the last 2 seasons in 2020. But that's only fair. SheRa sucked in season 1. It's such a bad start. It's entirely like building up the show, so I get why they had to do it. But at the same time, I feel like they could have put something to keep my interest in season 1 of the show. I guess they did. I guess Catra was the thing. It was okay for season 1. And then if I remember correctly, season 2 steps it up a whole lot. There are some really like moments that stick in my brain with this show, like Catra in the desert, beating up a bunch of goons, and like literally it's like a mini capsule of her entire arc. She's stuck in the desert and she has to basically go from the bottom to the top. It's very good. The finale was one of the better cartoon finales I'd seen up until this point. It doesn't really touch Avatar, but nothing can. Because like with shows like Gravity Falls, which I enjoyed the entire way through, the finale was kind of like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. It was the same with the original Steven Universe as well. It was like, oh, cool, I guess that, okay. And this one honestly felt pretty fulfilling. Like, it got a little bit like hokey at the end when it was like, everything is beautiful now, but it didn't feel like it was a stretch. Like, it felt like that's where the show was going the entire time. I also really like the fact that Adora's arc didn't go the way I was expecting it to. When she, like, throws away her destiny, to put it without spoilers, and has to, like, reconceptualize what that is, that got me pretty good, because, like Aang, Adora was kind of boring to me before that point. I was more interested in what everybody else had going on. And all the other characters are good, other than Hordak. I didn't really like Hordak. I mean, like, clone Hordak, not season finale Hordak. That's not a spoiler. I'm pretty sure he says that in, like, season 1. But Big Bad Hordak is fine. I didn't really care about other Hordak. Wasn't there, like, another... I didn't care about the other Hordak either. So I'm going to put this in B tier. I'd still recommend it, but it's really a slog for that first season. Until you get to, like, episode 8 or something, whichever one the ball episode is. That one is pretty good, but everything else is like, ugh, and then you get to the good stuff. So yeah. Oh, before I end off on the segment about SheRa, let me just say, I watched SheRa when I was a kid, actually. I'm not old enough to be watching it when it was airing, but we had this network in Canada called Teletoon Retro. And it basically just played old 80s cartoons that Teletoon had the rights to in Canada, which was like The Smurfs. Whoops. Ooh. There we go. The Smurfs, He-Man, Hercules, the old Transformers, not Power Rangers. Why did I say Power Rangers? I was watching Power Rangers at the same time, but it wasn't an old show that was on there. Oh, stop doing that. I keep grabbing my mouse and then... but I don't think it holds a candle to new SheRa. A lot of people complained, like, oh, look what they've done to my old show friend SheRa. But SheRa was kind of, like, boring. To be honest. Like, if you go back and watch 80s cartoons, you could watch, like, G.I. Joe, He-Man, SheRa, the Transformers, and have the exact same experience, aside from, like, aesthetics. They were all the same. So I like that SheRa, like, differentiated itself in such a way. And, I just find it really interesting. It's one of those shows where you like the villains almost more than the heroes. And I always enjoy those shows. Next is The Owl House. I didn't go in expecting to like this one, actually. I'd heard that it was good, but I was like, whatever. It seems pretty kiddie for me. But I got into it because Alex Hirsch was involved, who did Gravity Falls, in case you didn't know. And you know what? I had a good time. Kind of like SheRa, but to a much lesser extent, because there's only one season of this show out right now. The first little bit was kind of a drag. Like the episode... The Wizard, like the Chosen One episode, and the first episode at the school, and the very first episode, I was like, okay, this is kind of like a formulaic cartoon. And then after that, when it starts to get into the stuff with Amity and just the school in general and the main big bad, then it started popping off, and I started to actually like it a lot. Luce is a good character that I'm surprised we haven't seen more like yet in animation. She's basically like that... She's basically you when you were, like, reading fan fictions when you were a kid, assuming you did. I know I did. Legend of Zelda fan fictions, because the story was barely anything, but I liked the characters. And just, like, wants to write stuff, and, you know, it's nice. It feels like it's coming from a very honest place, and I like that. The characters are good in this show. The plot is starting, so I can't really comment much on it. But I liked it quite a lot. I think I'm going to put it above SheRa, for sure. Shockingly, it's not as amazing as Avatar, but nothing is. I'll say that forever. Tangled. This is the most recent one I actually finished. Is Tangled the series. I don't remember what it's called. Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure? Something like that. Anyway... This was actually kind of like the last two I just talked about. I didn't mean to put them in a row, but I guess I did. The first season dragged a lot in some places. I feel like I just don't like setup seasons. But at the same time, this show did some pretty formulaic kid show stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, this is the episode where Rapunzel has to learn that not everybody's gonna like you and you have to be okay with that. Oh, this is the episode where the best friends have a falling out. Although that episode was actually good, just as like a backstory episode. Oh, this one's where she has to learn to respect people's boundaries. Like, it's useful for kids, but for me, I was like, yeah, okay. When is it starting exactly? And it started on the Christmas episode, oddly enough. I've seen people comment on the show like, oh yeah, they made a very like nice, chill Halloween episode, and then the spooky, epic, dangerous episode was the Christmas special. That's funny. And it's really true. That episode is probably one of my favorites from the series, other than like the death fake outs at the end, which I don't feel bad for spoiling, because as soon as you see like 3 characters look like they're about to die, you're like, okay, none of them are going to die. Or only one of them is, but I doubt it. And yeah, no one dies in this show, as far as I can remember. Although they do threaten it quite a bit. And they do talk about, like, I guess this is spoilers for the Tangled movie, but if you haven't seen it yet, I don't know why you'd be listening to me talk about the show at all. They do talk about, like, the death of, what's her name? Gothel? Gothel, yeah. Mother Gothel? Is that her full title? I think so. So they don't, like, shy away from the concept, at least. When we get to, like, the actual plot, it's good. I think this show made me finally understand why people hated Steven Universe so much for having big breaks between the plot. Because honestly, I was, again, so enraptured with the world building in Steven Universe that I didn't really care if we didn't get to the plot. Like, I was fine with that. But this show, I didn't really care too much about the world building, because it was kind of just generic fantasy world with some dark evil wizard and blah 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 blah. The stuff about the sun drop is interesting, I guess, but it wasn't really what I was there for. The reasons I actually like this show are the characters, actually. Seeing Rapunzel and Eugene just be like happy together is really refreshing, because I feel like almost all shows revolve around some sort of like romantic tension, right? There's like, ooh, will they get together? Or, ooh, they're having a falling out. Like, if we want to look at these shows, Avatar had like the will they, won't they thing. Owl House did for a little bit. SheRa was completely about the relationship between the main 2 characters. And Brand New Animal also had a segment about these 2 who are friends, but we'll see how that progresses if this show ever continues. Honestly, is this show continuing? I haven't even looked it up. It felt like it left off on a cliffhanger, but I guess you can tell me in the comments. But this one, they just cared about each other. And they just talked about stuff and were like good to each other. And you know what? That was nice. I can't lie. I enjoyed the times where they were just like happy and in love. I was like, oh, it's great. And it's really smart the way they did it, because the villains of the show are friends. They carry that conflict that would normally be put on like the main relationship of the show, right? Instead of putting it on that well-established relationship from the movie that seemed pretty good at the end, you know? The movie was all about the troubles at the start of their relationship. This can just be them being happy. That said, decent show. There are some really good episodes, and there are some really bad episodes that are worthy of me being like, just skip them, honestly. So I think I gotta put this in B tier as well. I will put it under SheRa. I did have a good time with this show, and the music is really great, but it's probably not something I would go back and watch through in its entirety. Like, I could go back and watch all of SheRa. I'd be in pain in season 1, but after that, I'd be happy. I could go back and watch all of the Owl House and get, like, more from it. I feel like if I went back and watched Tangle again, I'd just watch the few episodes that were really good and then leave the rest of it. But yeah, songs are good. If nothing else, listen to the music. It's worth it. Steven Universe Future! Alright, so this one, I don't know, is this controversial? Is this show still controversial? It ended like, I don't know, a year ago almost, so, like the original. It must have been a year ago. It might be more than a year ago. I don't even remember. But Steven Universe Future was really good. I've always enjoyed Steven Universe. Well, that's not true. This is one of those shows that I watched the first 2 episodes of and was like, this isn't for me. I heard it was like Adventure Time. I liked a lot of Adventure Time. I dropped off of it halfway through. I still haven't finished it, so maybe next year. And I watched the first couple episodes of the original run of Steven Universe, and I, like, as soon as the Frybo episode ended, which is honestly the worst episode of the entire series, I don't think anybody would argue me on that, I was like, nah, I don't know, this is for people who like gross out humor, and not for me. But I tried it again after I was listening to some of the music. Honestly, that's how I get into most of these shows. Not SheRa, but most of these shows. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try it. And I ended up really liking it. I think it kind of lost some of its relevance when they closed the arcs of the Crystal Gems and started to move on to like the main plot. It was kind of like the Harry Potter thing I was telling you about. That's when I was like, oh, okay, this show is pretty much over. I don't know what else they have to talk about. And then the show ended, and then they said they were doing a, like, not a spin-off, epilogue series, I guess you'd call it. And I was like, but how? Like, they wrapped everything up. It wasn't like a super nice bow, but they did put a bow on it. And then I watched it, and I actually liked it way more. Honestly, I think all of like the struggle with Steven Universe and like dropping the ball in terms of some things was worth it just to get this epilogue series. I know some people are kind of critics of the ending, but I think if you take it on its own, separate from Steven Universe, which had this chronic problem of never resolving things without, hardship, quote unquote, like everything wrapped up very nicely most of the time. Everything that mattered, that is. There were a lot of characters, and they show up in this season, that like didn't end off with a good relationship with Steven and the crew, but they weren't very important, and they never came back. And this show kind of addresses some of that, where they show up again, and then they never come back. But still, there are some, almost every episode of this has at least a moment burned into my brain. The moment with the 2 pearls coming together. The moment with the dreamscape thing with Peridot. I'll never forget about that. That's burned in my brain. It's good. And now I'm going to talk about the main reason why I think it's good, because I got sidetracked talking about the original run. It's a deconstruction of the happily ever after that would come after like a chosen one, right? Because a lot of shows, Tangled actually did this too. A lot of shows would have you think, you know what? I'm going back. I'm putting Tangled above SheRa. SheRa was fun, and it tackled some similar topics to to Tangled. But I think Tangled just was much more concise with what it was trying to say with Rapunzel's arc. Anyway, Steven Universe Future tackles what would happen if you were a, like, 8... How old was Steven when the show started? He was young, like, really young. He ends up being, like, 16 in, the movie, right? So he was, like, I don't know, 14, 13, something like that? He was, like, way too young, to be fighting space dictators. And it kind of tackles the fact that, like, yeah, this kid's been, like, beat up a lot by giant people and strong folks. he's like almost died in space. There's a lot of trauma in his life. And it's kind of like unpacking the fact that like he was so desperate to like prove himself that he never really took a step back and thought like, wow, what is going on to me right now? He was so worried about everybody else. This feels like it was finally like taking an arc about Steven. Because Steven never really had arcs in the first show. He was kind of like not an insert character so much, but he was kind of blank slate in some ways. Like he was a happy-go-lucky kid. That was basically it for most of the show. And most of the arcs focused around Steven talking to somebody else about their problems, which was what the show was. And this is finally everybody else having to come and talk to Steven about their problems. And that is like completely addressed within this season of the show. It's just neat. As somebody who's like in psychology, like learning about psychology right now, with like the goal of eventually becoming a counselor of some sort, this is a show that's like, yeah, this is important, because there are people who are out there in the real world who definitely probably haven't fought aliens exactly, but have fought for like a lot of their life and haven't really had a chance to step back and consider what that's done to them, like psychologically, right? It was just really good. There was some like cringe moments that I couldn't watch where Steven was trying like really hard to hold it together when he definitely wasn't. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was worth it. I'm going to put it behind Avatar. Definitely doesn't come close to Avatar in terms of like cohesiveness, but it's still, I think, a more important show, like experience for me personally, and I think for other people, than these ones, which are good shows to watch, but they're not going to leave you with like this resounding feeling inside you of like, oh, maybe I need to do that as well, you know? All right. What I'm trying to say is this show made a real impact on me. These shows I just liked, right? And this show I had some problems with, but I still enjoyed. Oh, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor? You can't. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. A tier were shows that changed my outlook on life in a way. B tier shows were shows that I enjoyed, which touched on some good stuff. And then C tier show was a show that I did enjoy, I just had some problems with. So let's talk about Infinity Train Book 3. And I'm only doing Book 3 because you don't need the other two books to really understand this one. That's kind of how Infinity Train works. It's an anthology series. So you could watch Season 2 and get spoiled on some reveals for Season 1, but then you could go back and watch Season 1 and still have a completely different experience. The characters are completely different in every one. They usually pick up one character from a later season and make them either the protagonist or like secondary protagonist. So it's nice. It feels like it's flowing into each other still. But Infinity Train Book 3 kind of did away with that. Like, we saw Grace and Simon in Book 2, but they were barely there. They were there for like an episode and a half. I guess MT was only in one episode of the first book, but it felt like it had more impact because we actually got to like get insight into her as a character. I don't know how to talk about Book 3 of Infinity Train. When I was watching it, I was really like waiting with bated breath for the next episode because it was very gripping, right? You wanted to know what happened next. They brought back the main villain from Book 1. I was like, yeah, that's cool. The main characters were kind of the bad guys in the whole scheme of things. I don't think it's as good as Book 2, though. It touches on darker themes than Book 2, most certainly. But I don't think it's as good as Book 2. Just in the way that I feel like it's not done yet. I feel like, because this is the first book, let me preface this by saying this is the first book where someone doesn't end with their exit from the train. And that seems like a spoiler, but it's kind of obvious. Like, The main characters in this show all have giant numbers all over their bodies. Like there was no way they were getting through that at the end. It takes like days to get your number down like 20 points, and they've got numbers that are in like the, I don't even know, a lot, okay? If it's going around their arm, that's a lot of numbers. That's a big number. But it felt a little bit less fulfilling, and honestly, in some places I was like, okay, well, this is happening now. I think it starts really strong, and kind of like peters out a little bit at the end. Not that I didn't enjoy the main villain coming back and like scolding them for being bad people. But I don't know. It just felt a little bit less fulfilling. I do love Hazel though. Hazel was probably the best part of this season. Her like development from this completely naive kid, this completely naive but sassy child, into like someone who's very like cognizant of themselves, was interesting. I think I'm going to put it under SheRa. I think. Because I don't think it's bad. Certainly not bad. And I didn't have as much problems with it as I did Brand New Animal. But it's not really something I'd go back and watch, I don't think. It's just... it feels kind of like The Walking Dead. At least early Walking Dead. I don't even know what's going on with The Walking Dead anymore. Is that show still going? I stopped watching after Beth leaves the show. Let's just put it that way. I was like, what is this show doing? I don't even care anymore. And I feel like this book almost made me emotionally detach myself from the show for half of it, in the same way The Walking Dead does, where I was just like, whatever, I can't even invest myself in these characters because I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Not that I think Infinity Train is a bad show or a bad series entirely. In fact, I will watch the next season when it comes out, like the moment it comes out, and be super pumped about it. But I don't know. It just didn't carry as well as the first two to me. So I can't put it above like these shows, which you can't see my cursor, but I'm pointing to the shows that are in B tier, because I generally had like a really good time with them. And maybe that's just down to what I like in shows. Maybe I like characters who like each other a little bit. But hey, that's the tier list. Nothing in D tier, because I don't watch trash shows, alright? I only watch shows that have good recommendations. But I think it's clear that Avatar is definitely the best show out of this bunch. There's just so much about Avatar to like, and even though I think it ended slightly prematurely, very slightly, I just wanted a little bit more Zuko. It's still almost perfect, you know? Almost perfect. It's got a little bit of a rough beginning, and a little bit too little on the end, but other than that, amazing. So thank you guys for watching. That is my end of the year ranking whatever. I would love if you would leave a like and subscribe. I don't usually talk about cartoons, so sorry if you like that stuff. But if this video gets like massive amounts of views, maybe I'll do some proper reactions to stuff instead of just watching them on my own time, because I know my reactions to Tangled would have been good anyway. I don't know about these other shows. But speaking of which, let me remind you that I've set as my 10,000 subscriber reward that I would be reacting to the Danganronpa anime. All 3 parts, probably 2 episodes at a time or something. Just with little screenshots from the episode and me saying like, wow, that was dumb, or okay, I like that. So yeah, tell your friends, tell your pets, tell your alien in the attic, and I will see you next time. Bye. Does anybody even know about aliens in the attic?